Thank you very much. First, just a correction. I am not anymore a professor at Harvard University since I have left the US and I am now in Israel. So good morning to you, esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests. I'm very, very sorry to not be with you today, but my flight from Tel Aviv to Warsaw was cancelled due to the situation in the region. And so my apology goes especially to the host, the Center for Europe at Warsaw University, and of course to the European Center for Populism Studies, as I had the honor to be part of the academic steering committee to prepare this conference. I can testify of the intense labor and enthusiasm that went into the preparation for these 2 days. Now, without further ado, I would like to say a few remarks on religion and populism in national context and civilizational discourse. So the first point I would like to make is to present what is the state of the field today. Next slide, please. Can someone move the slide? I don't have it here in shared documents, so I cannot move.
Professor Cesari, is this a slide that you would like to see on the screen?
Yes, slide 2. Slide 2.
This is the one that you would like to continue with?
Yes.
Okay, beyond existing paradigms.
Yes.
Okay, now it's on the screen. You can continue.
There is no consensus on what is populism. I would say that the shared common point across the different study is to look at what is the definition of the people. Usually it's a very homogeneous reactionary approach to the national people based on one or two features, either religion or ethnicity. And it is geared to defeat the established elite or political elite. Having said that, the most influential interpretation of populism are either looking at the ideas, looking at the staging or performance of the populist leaders, or the strategic political orientation. So it is a very, very rich literature that tells you a lot on the mechanics of populist movement. When we look at religion, however, the role of religion is limited to be a symbolic or strategic function. And I would like to say here that this underestimates how religion is embedded in national identity and political legitimacy. It's not merely a tool, it is a grammar of national belonging and authority. So that's why I propose here a relational and genealogical framework that examines how religious populism is rooted in national histories, institutional structures, and transnational circuits. Next slide, please. The next slide is relational approach.
Yes, we have that slide on the screen, relational approach.
So the relational approach states that religion is shaped by national culture and institution. In other words, it's often misleading to look at the doctrine of a particular religion to understand the role of religion in the populist movement. It's more fruitful to look at the status of religion in the national context and the historical status of religion in society. So for this reason, I state that historical evolution matters. It is not enough to take the populist movement here and now, because then we don't understand why there are so many differences in the way that religion is mobilized, even if actors or leaders are using the same doctrinal or theological content. Next slide, please. The next slide is genealogy of sedimented practices. So what does it mean? It means that I combine Foucault's genealogical method with Laclau's concept of sedimented practices. Genealogical method is not history. It is tracing from now and how they are used in different arenas, religious symbols, institutions, and how they have evolved across time, shaped by power, history, and balance and cultural understanding of nation and religion. This method reveals the historical depths behind present-day populist mobilization. More specifically, it highlights the significant status of religion in national politics, even in very secular countries. And I insist on that. This is across the board. Sedimented practice, this I borrow from Laclau, another important scholar of populism. And this concept refers to the way that certain ideas, rituals, and narratives become naturalized in political life. And populists activate these deeply rooted practices to legitimize their vision of national identity and moral order. Next slide, please. It's called the methodological architecture. I'm not going to take long here to describe to you this method. It is a triangulated methodology. The first step was to look at meta-historical analysis of political and religious transformation in the US, Turkey, and Russia. These were the three cases on which I draw this presentation today, to extract keywords related not only to religion and or politics, but to the interaction between the two in a given national context. And I insist here on interaction because it shows a mutual, continuous movement between political and religious ideas, institutions, and actors. So from that, I extract a series of keywords, and I plug these keywords in a metadatabase to retrieve more than 30,000 articles to map this religious and political collocation, and then I went through a textual analysis. Next slide, please. So let's start with the United States. So first and foremost, Protestant Christianity, of course, lacks legal power in American nation and state institution, but it deeply shapes the public culture of the United States. It's shaped through symbols, themes, narratives, and that is an important point on which Trump will latch on. What is interesting and I would say worrisome in this case is that Christian moral authority is now combined, or I would say challenging, legal secularism, in the sense that the populist movement of Trump is making more and more vulnerable the legal secularism of state institutions in the US. So what does it mean concretely? Of course, he uses Christian values and themes to reclaim cultural and political dominance. This is the picture here, the typical example of a performative act of Trump presenting himself as a national leader rooted in Christianity with the Bible in the hand, which is the Bible is a huge symbol not only for Christian tradition, but here for American political culture. Don't forget that the president takes his horse or her horse to be maybe in the future on a Bible. So this is not particularly new. What goes beyond his rhetoric is to frame liberal elite as a threat to real Christian America. And that's the difference between, I would say, elements of Christianity in national political culture and turning Christianity against the political establishment. And even more worrisome is that he has, in his first mandate, it remains to see what he will do in the second mandate, it has fragilized legal secularism. Meaning what? Meaning that laws prohibiting contraception, abortion, limiting the rights of sexual minorities have been adopted under Trump. So this is clearly using religious values and norm to change the legislation of the whole country, or that will legislation that supposedly concerns the whole country independently of religious belief. And that is this erosion that is particularly worrisome. And if we don't take into account this legal aspect of populist movement, the changes in institutions, we tend to remove only on the rhetoric of the people, the national people. It's very important to look at the vertical acts. How do the populist leaders interact with the existing institutional establishment? So in this case, religious populism become institutionalized. Next slide, please. So if we move to Turkey, I first wanted to show you this picture that is again has a strong symbolic and also performative connotation. This is President Erdogan and his wife in what was to the Hagia Sophia, that was converted back to a mosque by Erdogan in 2020. So how to locate this kind of symbolic, but also very concrete political act within the broader religious and political landscape of Turkey. Next slide, please. So again, you have to go back to what was the status of religion in national communities. Secularism under Kemalism repressed Islamic public role, associating it with backwardness. Having said that, that is a social element of religion. We tend to forget that Kemal Atatürk also nationalized the main Islamic institution, the Sunni establishment, which is far from being a secular move. So again, we have to look here at what Atatürk did. He already institutionalized in some way religion into state institution through merely the creation of a Ministry of Religious Affairs, known in Europe as Diyanet. And this put mosques, civil servants, education, religious education, everything related to Islam under the purview, the control, and the funding of the state. At the same time, he did push to remove Islamic symbols from public life and social interactions. So interestingly, what we call Erdogan populism is not touching on this already institutionalized aspect of religion in Turkish political life. He reversed the narrative, pushing against the idea that Islam is backwardness. He's showing, and most of his initial popularity was to insist that allowing Islam in public space was actually a way to democratizing Turkey, because under the Kemalist regime, the state and political life were governed or superseded by the army. And we can say that in his first phase, Erdogan really pushed toward democratization of Turkey, but insisting that putting Islam in the public space was a part of this democratization. Since 2012, we know that the regime has taken a more authoritarian turn, and we have seen also the increased reference in the definition of Turkey, the increased reference to the Ottoman past, something again that the Kemalist elite would never do. The Ottoman past was not even taught in school. And so that's a big difference here, reconnecting with the Ottoman history to restitute to Turkey this kind of international, transnational legitimacy. And we know that he has been very active on the pan-Islamic front by endorsing, supporting all causes or international conflict that involve Islam. So in this case, religion is not only at the core now of Turkish national identity, but it is also very interesting how he has achieved in some way to make the narrative that the symbolic inversion of secular modernity is possible. And I would say that even the secular people in Turkey would agree with that. It's very striking, for example, to see in the street young women wearing the scarf and others who don't wear it. And that is not the site of contestation, for example. The site of contestation is the erosion of the rule of law and of the separation between executive and legislative in Turkey. But it's not anymore this presence of Islam in public space. I have to say that Erdogan has not called for installing Sharia. So he is working within the parameter of the Kemalist institution. His only move has been to reopen and fund heavily educational institution and program based on Islam. So in terms of policy, we see that, again, internationally, he has withdrawn from the Istanbul Convention that protected women's rights. And as I mentioned and showed in the slide before, he has nationalized the Hagia Sophia or reconvert the Hagia Sophia church into a mosque, which signifies a reclamation of civilizational sovereignty rooted in historical memory. Next slide, please. So if we move to Putin and Russian Orthodoxy, we see that the Russian Orthodox Church has been elevated as a spiritual and political foundation of the Russian nation and beyond. But interestingly, if I compare with Trump and Erdogan, we do not see, in the case of Putin populism, a push toward changing the whole legislation in favor of religious conservative values. And in this sense, the secular legalism is holding up, probably because of the past of Russia under the Soviet Union. Nonetheless, in the last constitutional amendment, although orthodoxy is not acknowledged, there is a mention to the ethnic, historical, cultural past of the Slavic community, which is a sort of back-ended way to also put the religion symbolically in the constitution. The strongest alliance between the patriarchate and Putin shows in international stance as part of a broader civilizational mission. And here we can say that Erdogan and Putin have a lot in common, in the sense that they really invest in religion to increase the soft power of their state and nation. So in this case, through themes like Holy Rus, Third Rome, Putin presents Russia as morally superior to the quote-unquote liberal West, which converge with the Islamic discourse of Erdogan. The church-state alliance is not just symbolic. It also forms, in this case, the core of Russian national identity and geopolitical positioning, and it was particularly striking in the attack of Russia on Ukraine, while everybody in the West was reading that as a sanction against Ukraine for applying to NATO. Someone more familiar with the Russian national narrative and political power would have told you that the Ukraine is inscribed in the natural understanding of the global Orthodox community. So it was a matter of time, and maybe the NATO application was a pretext, but not a cause, for the invasion of Ukraine. And the patriarchate has heavily supported the war, and you have Orthodox priests blessing and throwing blessed water to the soldiers. So things that do not appear automatically in the Western coverage of Ukraine. Orthodoxy is used here to fuse moral legitimacy with state power, portraying Russia as a besieged guardian of spiritual sovereignty, not only in Russia, but also globally. And the Orthodox Church presents itself as a defender of traditional values internationally. Next slide, please. Another point is that this civilizational populism is not confined within national border, as I just showed for Erdogan and Putin, much less so for Trump. They use religion to shape foreign policy and global identity. I say much less so for Trump because we can identify a few striking acts like moving the US embassy to Jerusalem, but this remains sporadic, while I can see in the case of Putin and Erdogan a systematic politics to promote a pan-Orthodox or pan-Islamic understanding of international relations. And these transnational appeals are embedded in civilizational populism and guide the position of Erdogan and Putin on global politics, while Trump remains much more centered on American interest, America first, Make America Great. It does, of course, include an element of Christianity, but it's much more developed nationally than internationally. So if I close up on a cross-national comparison, in the US, political Christianity is something that you could find also in the past of the US without being automatically called populism. And that's why I push back against the use of Christian nationalism that doesn't pay enough attention to the institutionalization of religious norms, because this is an important point. You have, until today, the majority of Americans would consider America Christian. It doesn't mean that they support this institutionalization of Christian norms at the state level. And I think it's an important point to make here. And that's why I prefer the term religious populism than Christian nationalism to describe what's going on in the case of the US. Russia, you see state-church alliance to anchor orthodoxy not only in the national narrative, but also in the globalization, on the global scene, the global political scene. And finally, Turkey has revived a political Islam, and it grants to Islam a national authenticity that was not present in the past secularist narrative, but it's also used as, Islam is also used as a soft power for foreign policy. And last slide. So the key takeaway here, it's important if we look at religion and populist movement to pay attention to materiality of religion, not only to ideas or beliefs. The buildings, the bodies, the object, and you have seen that through the pictures I show, are as significant as doctrine, actually even more so. So it means that it is important to localize these elements of religion within a particular political context. So religion in this way has been shaped by its position, historical position in any given nation. So religious populism is indeed contextual, and you cannot just identify ideas and populist leader style without relocalizing these acts or policy within the national context. And finally, religious populism is not monolithic, but a family of localized political expression. Just really to conclude, so the question that comes all the time is in implication and conclusion, which is really the last slide. Civilizational populism is a danger to democracy when there is a deliberate attempt to change the rule of law and to inscribe the religious norm into the secular legal system. So that's why I think it's very important to abandon generic models and engage with the historical, relational, and empirical realities of religious populism, because not everything can be done across context. And that is why I will close up on asking or calling for a more nuanced and context-specific analysis of religion and populism. Thank you for your attention.